Right, so you guys asked for it, so today that is what we are going to be doing, and that is putting NHL players back on their hometown teams. So how's it going, everybody? Welcome to the channel. Welcome to another video. That's what we're doing today, as you can tell by the title. Putting NHL players back on their hometown teams. So this is going to be something that is going to be definitely interesting, and there's a few things I want to go over just before we start the video here. Number one, this took me about 7 hours to do. I have another roster where I'm actually moving everybody over individually and trying to do that. Very difficult, and it's going to take more time. I have to look up every player and where they're from on the computer. So it makes things hard when you have half of the frickin' league born in the Toronto area, because there's only 35 players that can fit on the Leafs or something around that number or something. So you have to create like Toronto and then Toronto 2 and then like maybe Toronto 3. It makes things difficult, as well as like Swedish and Finland-born players. I, again, don't think it's fully possible to do that just because so many players are from dominant areas. So what I did instead is I moved every player over an 80 overall for the most part. There's some players that I had to keep on their original teams because the balancing factor, because I don't want the league to be too terrible. So some guys had to be left. Obviously, European guys left on the teams that they're from, but some guys had to be moved around and left just because of the balancing factor, or else we'd have ridiculous teams and teams that had absolutely no chance of winning a single game in the season unless they played each other. And I didn't want that. I wanted it to be somewhat of a fair league simulation. So third point, I guess, or second point, because I guess that was kind of two, is that teams that are multiple state teams, I basically put all the players on one team. So, for example, New York, the Rangers have all the players. Florida, the Panthers have all the players. California, LA has all the players. Just to make things simpler, we're going to be going over the rosters really quickly. Another thing, I just did this for 24 minutes going over rosters and noticed that my mic was turned off. So that's fantastic, guys. There's no freaking audio. So that's great. So if you guys could leave a like for this, this video is going to take like 8 or 9 hours in total time, maybe 10 hours to put together. If you could leave a like, definitely subscribe to the channel if you're new. I definitely appreciate it. You guys asked for it, so spending more of my time to do it for you guys. So let's start here with Anaheim. So again, a team that gets picked through completely. They lose players. Forwardly, that's what they're looking like. Defensively, that's what they're looking like. They didn't get anybody. In net for them, Jonathan Bernier. Arizona now, Matthew Tkachuk, Sean Couturier move their way on over. Galchenyuk stays just for the balancing factor, going on defense. Jarmelson there. Marian Hossa is playing defense for them for some reason, not a clue why, but again, computer-generated lines, so I can't go ahead and change that. In net, Antti Ranta and Darcy Kuemper. Now we get to the first team in the league that's pretty much considered a powerhouse, and that would be the Boston Bruins. Brad Marchand is a player that I spent probably 20 minutes last night trying to figure out which team was his favorite, because I believe he grew up in New Brunswick. Not 100% sure, but I was trying to figure out what favorite team he had growing up. Couldn't find anything on him, so he's staying on the Bruins. But they get players like Jack Eichel and Chris Kreider and Connor Sheary and Jimmy Vesey. So again, Brian Boyle, not Dan Boyle down there, definitely fixed that mistake. I don't know why I even did that in the first place. Defensively, John Carlson, Hanifin, Yannel, and John Moore definitely get a way better defensive core than what they had. In net for them, Corey Schneider is still a good goaltender. So again, Boston going to be a massive powerhouse in the league. Now, Buffalo gets picked through quite a bit, and they get one player, like actually 3 players, I think, out of the deal. Patrick Kane, Nick Foligno, and Marcus Foligno. So again, a team that just absolutely gets ransacked because there's not a lot of Buffalo-born players. Carter Hutton and Linus Armok in net for the Buffalo Sabres. Now, Carolina, I believe, is a team that doesn't have a single NHL-born player. Could be wrong, but a team that got picked through and nobody back. So again, you can see kept Dougie there just to kind of balance things else. Toivo Teravainen, Sebastian Aho are still going to stay on the team because they're European-born. In net for them is Peter Mrazek and Scott Darling. So Columbus, I can't remember. I think they get like JT Miller out of the deal, and I think defensively Nick Baptiste, maybe. I'm not 100% sure. Like it's honestly, it's pretty hard to remember exactly who goes where. Like there was over a couple hundred players I moved around last night, so I can remember notable ones obviously, but players that aren't as notable like JT Miller, it's kind of a blanking in my mind, so you're just gonna have to bear with me here. That's what Columbus looks like. Now Chicago's a team that lost quite a bit of firepower, got a few players back, Clayton Keller and Christian Fischer, Ryan Zingle there as well, Christian Dvorak, quite a few of the Arizona Coyotes, believe it or not, come on back. But again, there's Chicago's front forwards. Josh Manson on defense, so they do lose quite a bit of defensive prospects for the team. Craig Anderson and Al Montoya, both Illinois-born players, in net for them. On to Colorado. Nathan MacKinnon, same kind of story as Brad Marchand. Couldn't figure out his favorite team growing up as a kid, so we're going to keep him on the Avs. Matt Calvert moves his way on over. Alexander Kerfoot there. Brandon Lemieux, another team that moves, or another player that moves his way on over to the team. Sorry, Nick Shore as well. Jacob Slavin, Carlo, Ian Cole, Patrick Nemeth, no, Sam Girard though, I believe, and Simeon Varlamov, Ben Bishop, Colorado-born, in net for the Avs. So Dallas gets ransacked and doesn't really get a whole lot back in return because they lose a lot of their star power. As you can see, this is kind of what the forward lines are looking like for the team. Going to defense, this is where they did get players in Seth Jones and Tyler Myers. So their defense gets better. Not terribly better, but it does get better. In net for them, Grubauer and Khudobin. Now, Detroit, Michigan, is known for turning out a lot of hockey players and being a very big hockey state. So Kyle Connor, obviously, there on the Red Wings. DeBrincat gets moved on over. Thomas Vanek stays there. Ryan Kessler, Abdelkader, Franzen, and Austin Watson as well. If we go down to the scratch line, this is what they have. Luke and Glendening, Nick Jensen, and Martin Firk. In net for them is Connor Hellebuck and Ryan Miller, so a very good net presence for them. Zach Werenski, though, Jake Trouba, Martinez, Krug, DeKaiser, and Jeff Petrie. So they really stack up on defense. So Detroit, another powerhouse, going to be in this sim. So Edmonton loses Connor McDavid, but they get Jake DeBrusk and Brandon Gallagher. So there's that, and Brian Little, and Pontus Aberg. I don't know why they have Pontus Aberg, but they do. They do fall quite a bit. Like, overall, they lose a lot of good players for the team. Jared Spurgeon comes back, as well as Johnny Boychuk, Jay Bouwmeester. So the defense doesn't look terrible. It's actually one of the better defenses in the league. Cam Talbot is going to be starting for them in net. So the Florida Panthers are the first team that is a statewide team that's all compiled into one team. Just because, again, it's really difficult to figure out which team the player would have been the hometown team. Just because if you're not born in Florida or not born in the Miami area, then you might be born in the Jacksonville area, and there's no team up there other than like Tampa, and it's easier to put everybody on one team that is in a multi-state. So again, Florida gets picked through like crazy. They do get Gostisbehere there, so that is a definite upgrade on defense for them as being one of the best defensive prospects in the NHL. In net, Markstrom and yeah, Gorgiev. I don't know. I have not a clue. The Kings, another statewide team there for California. So Jason Zucker and Austin Matthews, California-born Austin Matthews, believe it or not, gets moved on over to the team. Trevor Lewis, Kyler Yamamoto. They're not. Kyler Yamamoto is not a California-based player, but he just got moved over in the trades. Alan Quinn and Elias Anderson. Jake Muzzin gets to stay to balance things out across the league. Brooks Orpik, Matt Nieto. In net, who do they have in net? They have Jonathan Quick and Peter Budaj. So the Minnesota Wild, probably one of the best teams in the frickin' league now at this point, as they produce a lot of good players. Brock Besser, Blake Wheeler, Nino Niederreiter, Mikko Koivu, Anders Lee, Zach Parise, Derek Stepan, Kyle Okposo, Brock Nelson, Nick Bukestad, David Backus. Just crazy overall. Ryan Suter, Bufflin, Dumba, McDonough, Brady Shea, and Justin Falk. Crazy overall team for Minnesota. In net, they have Devin Dubnyk and Stalock, and scratch for the team is Gardner, Nick Leddy, and Justin Braun. So 3 scratched good players as well. So the Montreal Canadiens, team that just gets absolutely crazy. This is another team that has an insane amount of players. Speaking of insane players, Sidney Crosby is playing for the Canadiens because his favorite team growing up was the Montreal Canadiens. Yeah, he was one of the only players that I looked up that I could actually find. He said it in an interview before he got drafted that he was a Canadiens fan growing up. So he's the first-line center, centering Jonathan Huberdeau and Jonathan Marchessault. Mantha Bergeron-Perron there, Thomas Tatar, Derek Brassard, Yanni Gourde, Andrew Shaw, Pierre-Luc Dubois, and Nicolas Deslauriers. Defensively is Vlasic, Letang, Savard, Demers, Scandella, and Ouellette. In net for them is Corey Crawford and Marc-Andre Fleury. And scratched for the team is Pominville, Matthew Perreault, and Philip Deneau. New Jersey is a team that adds a few players just because there's not a lot of New Jersey-born NHL players, but they do get the likes of Johnny Gaudreau, James Van Riemsdyk's there, Bobby Ryan as well, and going through, that's, you know, other players they get, Scott Wilson, I believe, Damon Severson stayed on the team, but they do add Trevor Van Riemsdyk, and Ben Lovejoy, I think, as well. He might be on the jersey. It's hard to remember. Like I said, there's so many players I moved last night. But that's the Jersey Devils. Nashville's a team that pretty much stays the same other than losing some firepower because there's not a single born Tennessee player in the NHL. So that's what the Nashville Predators look like. Players that you'd expect. They have a shot. They're still 90 overall with this team. So again, you can expect anything from Nashville. They're still deep. The Islanders get picked through, don't get a whole lot back. Josh Bailey and Jordan Eberle staying on the team just to kind of balance things out and make things fair for them. There's the forwards. Defensively, this is what they're looking like. So again, not really great. In net for them, Robin Lehner and Thomas Greiss. Now, the Rangers are going to get the New York State-born players. So they're going to be adding players like Alex Tuch there, as well as Dustin Brown. I think Ryan Callahan as well, and Cody McLeod. Charlie McAvoy comes on over. Zach Bogosian comes on over. In net for them, Henrik Lundqvist and Jimmy Howard, who is a New York State-born player. Scratched Brendan Smith. That's their scratch lineup, so nothing really crazy there for the New York Rangers. So Ottawa had about 5 born players in the NHL. So they did take a pretty big hit, losing a lot of good players. Paul Byron there, Jean-Gabriel Pajot, and I can't really remember a whole lot more. So I think Paul Carey there. Defensively, Cody Ceci, I believe, Mark Mathot, Eric Goodbranson, all Ottawa-born players, Cam Morgan, Yaroslav Halak in net. Now, Pennsylvania has NHL players, but they're all from the Pittsburgh area. So, the Flyers get absolutely picked through. They're one of the worst teams now. Still halfway decent, but again, didn't really get anybody back. Pretty much every Philadelphia-born player was born in the Pittsburgh area. So the Pittsburgh Penguins do lose a couple players. They get Brandon Saad there, Trocheck as well. Again, when you lose Crosby, it sucks no matter who you are. So that's what the Penguins look like in net, John Gibson and Matt Murray. So that is a very good goaltending tandem. Moving down to San Jose now, another California team that gets picked through, but still performs fairly well after the players that leave. So again, this is what they look like. Have to keep things balanced. So Erik Karlsson's still there, no problem. Again, he would have been no matter what, but I was talking more along the lines of Logan Couture. In net for them, Aaron Dell and Anders Nielsen. Now, St. Louis has a few born players in the NHL like Pat Maroon and Adam Lowry. I can't exactly remember. They weren't massively big players, so you're going to have to forgive me there. I decided to keep Parayko on the team just because, again, balancing issues. In net is Jake Allen and Jeff Glass. Now, Tampa Bay is a team that gets picked through, but still comes out as like a 91 overall because they're just such a good freaking team. Palat Johnson and Kucherov there. As you can see, that's what they're sticking with. Players that they've had before. Victor Hedman, Stroman, they still stay a very strong team. And with Vasilevsky in net, anything is freaking possible. Now moving on to the 7 million headed giant in the NHL, and that is the Toronto Maple Leafs. Every freaking good player in the NHL comes from the Toronto area for some stupid reason. And this is what their team looks like. Tavares, McDavid, Sagan, Marner, Stamkos, Scheifele, Barry, Giroux, Simmons, Neil, Carter, Hoffman. That's just the forwards. Going defensively for the Leafs. Burns, Doughty, Pietrangelo, Subban, Riley, and Giordano. Like, honestly, there's no way this team doesn't win. Scratch, Henrik, Duchesne, and Kadri. They are their scratched players. Like, that's crazy. Mike Smith in net, Steve Mason, not the greatest backup. With Mike Smith, anything is possible. And if Toronto doesn't win this at a 98 overall for their team, I'm going to be surprised. Vancouver's a team that, again, gets a lot of players for them. Jamie Benn, Ryan Johansson, Evander Kane. First line is very good. Barzal moves on over. Turris moves on over. Lucic comes on over. Andrew Ladd, very washed up, but he comes on over. Defensively, Tyson Barrie, Shea Weber, Chris Tanev stays, Justin Schultz moves, and Brent Seabrook. In net, though, Carey frickin' Price, so you know they're going to be a damn playoff team with Martin Jones backing him up. Scratched, again, not any player that I think is too big of a deal, but Vancouver definitely gets a big upgrade. There's no Nevada-born players in the NHL, so Vegas got picked through and left with the leftovers, so as you can see, that's what it looks like. Not anything crazy. In net for them is Lettinen and Subban. Winnipeg there, Mark Stone, Jonathan Taves, Patrick Laine. Again, Winnipeg gets a bunch of good players in Mark Stone, Taves, Patrick, Alexander Steen, Travis Zajac, Max Domi, Michael Furlan, Brandon Tanev was on Winnipeg, Cody Eakin, Ryan Reeves, Duncan Keith, Travis Hamonic, Kulikov, Mark Stone, Michael Stone, sorry, Joe Morrow, and Ben Sherratt. Winnipeg gets good. In net, they're not really the greatest. There's your scratch players for the Jets. And now we're going to move on to the Washington Capitals, who pretty much stayed the same as there's no Washington, D.C. born players in the NHL. And a lot of their team is European in the first place. So that's what we're looking like. Again, Holtby's still in net because being a Sask guy, there's no team in Saskatchewan. So that's what Washington looks like. And now let's take a look at the Calgary Flames, who is my team. So Calgary gets a few players that get moved around just because of the entire way the league is set up. So Taylor Hall, Ryan Getzlaf, and William Nylander. Nylander, yes, was born in Calgary. Getzlaf was a Calgary Flames fan growing up. He also played for the Hitmen, and I figured, you know, may as well move him over to Calgary. Backlund there, Braden Point as well comes on over. So again, really good centers for the team. Patrick Eaves, Jay Beagle down there with the Airdrie sensation Ty Ratty. Going defensively is TJ Brody, Josh Morrissey, Mike Green, Thomas Hickey there, Braden Coburn, and Brett Kulak. In net for this team is Freddie Anderson and Chad Johnson. Scratched on the team is Derek Ryan and John Gillies. That's what Calgary looks like. So let me know quickly in the comment section who you think is going to win this year. I obviously think it's going to be Toronto. Let's go ahead, sim the season, and see what happens. All right, so the season is complete. The playoffs are done, and as predicted, Toronto absolutely dominated the league. 140 points, 70 wins, 12 losses throughout the season. Detroit, second in that with 55, 19, and 8. Boston goes 53, 18, and 11. Minnesota, another team that's really good. Vancouver, Montreal, the teams we expected. The top 6 are teams that were powerhouses. Colorado making it in there, 47, 29, and 6. Dallas, again, somehow squeaks in. Don't know that. San Jose is in the playoffs. New Jersey makes the playoffs. The Caps, Tampa Bay, we make the playoffs there as the final team, or I guess in our division. Carolina getting the playoffs. Buffalo getting just edged out just a little bit there. Pittsburgh also edged out. The LA Kings, St. Louis makes it in. As we move our way down, Winnipeg does not. So another Canadian team. Edmonton, again, doesn't make the playoffs. The Flyers, and these are teams that we would expect to not make the playoffs. So that is the final standings for the team, so you can look at how your team did there with hometown players. Of course, goals, 320 goals for with 174 goals against. Just crazy. Crazy scoring for Toronto. 26 power play goals, a 25% power play. That's ridiculous. Shorthanded goals against was only 2. Power play goals against was 46 on the season, so maybe a little bit bad for the discipline. Penalty kill percentage was only 80%, which wasn't really the greatest, but 34-7 at home and 36-5 on the road. The last 10 games, they went 8-2. So here's the entire points, and your leading point getter for the season is John Tavares with 90. Patrick Kane put up 89 on Buffalo. McKinnon put up 87 on Colorado. McDavid put up 87. Barkov, 86. Rantanen, 85. Malkin, 82. Pasternak there, 82. Jamie Benn, 82. So quite a few point-of-game players. Ilya Kovalchuk, almost a point-of-game player there with Anze Kopitar. Gaudreau, there's Jeff Skinner. So I'm going to keep on going through this so that way you can see basically what happened. Crosby down there at 74 points on the Montreal Canadiens. So again, just crazy overall stats for a lot of these players, which is just incredible to see. So many 50-plus players in the league this year, which is good. That was a really good sim. So leading in goals is Vladimir Tarasenko and Ovechkin. Patrick Kane, Taylor Hall, not far behind them. So there's your goal leaders for the year. Mikko Rantanen wins the assist category with McDavid, not very far behind him either. Barkov, Jason Zucker. So again, John Tavares had 54 assists. Just crazy years for these guys that all had over 50 assists. Highest plus minus goes to PK Subban, and pretty much the entire freaking Toronto Maple Leafs get the top 6. Most penalties go to Jake Dotchin, who gets 160 minutes. Taylor Hall took the most shots with 324. And Pasternak had the best shooting percentage with the 19, almost 20%. Will Butcher and Ivan Provorov played the most minutes. Of course, defensemen with an average of 26 minutes per game. And of course, these guys played the most in the NHL. Mike Smith actually absolutely dominated it this year with 54 wins, 11 losses, and 0 overtime losses. Connor Hellebuck, a great season for him as well. Carey Price, Corey Schneider, Varlamov, Dubnyk, Freddie Anderson, Aaron Dell. Great seasons by all these goalies to put up just insane numbers. Schneider gets the highest save percentage, though, with a 9.33, and Markstrom had the worst goals against average with a 9.21, with the best being Schneider at a 1.94, which is very good. And Cam Ward actually ends the year with 4 points, so there is that. So let's take a look at the awards really quickly as season is done, and then we will jump into the playoffs. Who won the Stanley Cup and how they got there? So Art Ross goes to Tavares, as well as the Hart. James Norris goes to PK Subban. Lady Bing goes to Patrick Kane. Middlestat's going to get the Calder. Conn Smythe goes to Mike Smith. Vezina goes to Corey Schneider. Mike Smith gets the William M. Jennings. Petrovic gets the Bill Masterson. Taves gets the Selke. Ted Lindsay goes to Tavares. And Ovechkin getting the Rocket Richard. So there you have your Stanley Cup final. And who is the victors? The Toronto Maple Leafs. Just like I said, there's no way they didn't win the damn thing. And they had an interesting last series. I don't know how in the heck they played against Carolina in the Eastern Conference Finals, but they did. Let's take a look at how they got there. So, Colorado played Dallas. They won 4-3. Minnesota played St. Louis. They won 4-2. San Jose played Calgary, won 4-2. And Vancouver played LA and won 4-2. That means Minnesota played Colorado in the semis, and they beat them 4-1. Vancouver swept San Jose in the semis to meet Minnesota in the conference finals, and that was a 6-game series that the Canucks took to punch their ticket to the Stanley Cup Finals. So looking at the Eastern Conference, the Caps played the Carolina Hurricanes, and Carolina beat Washington. Don't understand how that happened. New Jersey played Montreal. New Jersey beats Montreal. Don't understand how that happened. Detroit played Boston, so that was a big powerhouse matchup. Detroit beats them in 6, and Tampa Bay played Toronto, and Toronto beat them in 6. So going into the semis, in Carolina versus New Jersey there, and Carolina wins in 5. Again, don't get it. But Toronto and Detroit, huge matchup there, and Toronto wins that one in 6, and Toronto plays Carolina in the conference finals. They sweep them to go on to play the Vancouver Canucks in the Stanley Cup Final, which goes 7, and they end up winning the Cup. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video of what would happen if NHL players went back to their hometown team. Like I said, I do have the other roster, and I can continue working on that if you guys want to see that. But again, it's going to take probably another 6 or 7 hours to complete that roster, if it's even possible to the most accurate standpoint. So let me know down in the comments if you want to see that. Also, let me know what kind of videos you want to see in the future. And if you enjoyed this one, like if you have any suggestions, let me know. We'll make them happen. Because I'm really enjoying doing stuff like this. It takes a lot of time, but not a lot of guys are doing it, and I think it's cool to see. So thank you for watching. Hopefully you did. If you did, definitely be sure to smash that like button. If you're new here to the channel and you made it this far, you may as well click the subscribe button, turn on post notifications so you don't miss a video here in the future. And I want to thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed, and I will talk to you next time.